rolling right along with recruiting, Jordan, and we got a couple names still on the board. Obviously, this class is not complete yet for the Clemson Tigers. The 2026 class has been amazing. There's been some highs, there's been some lows. We just talked about it, right? But we got a couple more big commitments that we're looking to the future of for this 2026 class. And the soonest one, the most pressing one, I guess, right now is Blake Stewart, safety that we are looking to bring on and get a commitment from. Just a couple days away from his commitment day. I think Sunday, July 13th, is his commitment day. What are your thoughts on Blake Stewart? Where does the recruitment stand right now? What kind of chances does Clemson have of landing Blake Stewart for that safety class?
Yeah, this recruitment for Blake Stewart has certainly been very much in favor of the Tigers over the course of the official visit, cycle. He came to the official visit weekend, and Clemson had a very clear lead. And, I think through the official visits, I would still say Clemson still holds the cards in that recruitment. But Miami and Michigan have certainly, made their pushes, especially late this week. I still feel pretty comfortable picking Clemson right now. But again, you never know until the guy actually announces, because as we saw, I felt pretty good about picking Bryce Perry right to Clemson a couple weeks ago, and we saw how that changed. So these recruitments certainly can change in a heartbeat, especially with NIL involved. But I still like Clemson right now, and we'll kind of see what happens when he makes his decision on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel much like you. I feel really good right now about Blake Stewart. I think eventually he ends up being a Clemson Tiger. I think he's a part of this 2026 class. I feel pretty comfortable about it. However, to your point, this is recruiting, and you never know what's going to happen. We felt great about Bryce Perry right for months, and it didn't work out, obviously. I think Blake Stewart will be a different story. I think he'll shut it down. I think he'll become a Clemson Tiger, and I think we'll get some great news this Sunday and be ready to make an awesome video, just shouting out Blake and, just excited and break down his film a little bit and talk about what he's going to bring to the Tigers. But that's what Clemson fans should be looking forward to this weekend, the Blake Stewart commitment. I think it'll happen Sunday. So, guys, stay by your devices wherever you get your recruiting news, because I think we're going to have some really good news come this Sunday. So excited about that. All Clemson fans should be. Another, probably the biggest name that we have left out there on the Clemson board anyway, is none other than linebacker Tyler Atkinson, Jordan. He recently cut his list to 4, I believe. Clemson is obviously included in that list. This is a guy that if people remember, like the beginning of the year, I should say, not the season, the beginning of this year, when Tom Allen just came on board and Ben Boulware had just been promoted to linebackers coach and all those changes happened. We weren't even in the conversation. Tyler Atkinson wasn't even thinking about Clemson. And Ben Boulware goes out there and makes Tyler Atkinson a priority and basically just keeps beating his head against that wall until he gets him on campus, right? And now suddenly we are in the top 4 of a guy that wasn't even considering us in January, right? So that's exciting. Just that alone for Clemson fans should get you excited about a young linebacker coach in Ben Boulware and bringing on Tom Allen as your defensive coordinator, because I think those 2 pivotal moves are the reason that you even have interest from Tyler Atkinson right now. So with that said, Jordan, tell us about Tyler Atkinson's recruitment. Where is it at right now? I know he's cut it down to 4. We still don't have a commitment date, at least that we've heard of as of yet. When do you expect him to shut it down and make a decision on where he'll be playing college football?
Yeah, he just recently cut his list, as you mentioned, down to 4. That 4 being Clemson, Georgia, Texas, and Oregon. Surprisingly, no Ohio State. That's one that, especially if you asked somebody a couple months ago you would have felt really strong about Ohio State being in his top schools.
They didn't even get an official.
They didn't even get an official visit, and so I think that tells you a good bit about what this recruitment actually is versus what it's kind of been framed as. I don't see this recruitment quite the same as Bryce Perry Wright's. For a number of reasons. Obviously, I don't think Clemson like holds the cards or has the connections that obviously they did with Bryce Perry Wright. Although having Mickey Kahn and his Grayson connection certainly plays a huge role. I think Clemson, like I said, I think Clemson has put together a really, really strong offer for him from a financial standpoint. I'm not sure if all of his recruitment is just going to be about money. I could be wrong. Maybe it comes down to the highest bidder at the end of the day. Yeah. But the way that he's gone about these things, I do think other things actually truly do matter in this recruitment, and not just the who has the highest dollar amount. So I think that plays a ton. And he's kept things really close to the vest. The industry people seem to think Georgia is probably the pick.
Yeah,
there's not really any strong belief in that right now. It's really just he's a 5-star. He's the number 1 linebacker in the state of Georgia. Those guys typically don't leave Georgia very often.
Yeah, Kirby Smart tends to not let guys like that get out of the state of Georgia.
Right. and I think that's a very justifiable way of going about it. The odds probably would say that he ends up at Georgia. Yeah. But there are things that I think there's a reason Clemson is in this recruitment with a few other big time NIL spenders in Texas and Oregon especially. So I do think Clemson is much more in this recruitment than maybe people would think, and that's what I've continued to say is like people are like, man, Clemson doesn't really have a shot here. I disagree. I think they do have a shot. I wouldn't call them the favorite, but I definitely think that it would not be the most shocking thing in the world if Clemson were to pull this one off. So I do think there's a lot that generally interests Tyler about Clemson, and we'll see whether they can play into that enough for Clemson to be the choice when he announces his commitment. As far as a date is concerned, I thought it was going to be early August. Now it seems like it's going to be sometime this month, maybe a couple weeks from now, maybe late July.
Yeah.
We'll find out when we find out. He kind of marches by the beat of his own drum. I mean, you saw it with his official visits. He didn't announce them until like a couple days before the weekend, half the time.
Yeah, he would only
a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. So he
would only announce his official visits like week of that he was headed down there. So yeah, definitely got to keep stuff close to the vest, not allowing a lot of leaks out there. That's why nobody really knows. Everybody's going to say Georgia because, well, he's a hometown kid in Georgia. Typically, like I said, Kirby Smart doesn't let these caliber of players get out of the state of Georgia very often. I see people in the chat mentioning Sammy Brown. That was definitely one that got away from Georgia. And Tyler Atkinson could be another one that Clemson could steal out of the state of Georgia. But I get the sentiment that Georgia's probably the logical pick there because of all those circumstances. But at the end of the day, when you see I want Clemson fans to understand just how much of a pivot Clemson has made on the recruiting trail and how much of a priority that they are now making. And they're being smart with their NIL stuff. You're starting to see, and I know we lost out on Bryce Perry Wright, and that was tough. That's a tough pill to swallow, right? But you're in it with the big dogs, right? The big spenders. Texas A&M may not be a college football national championship level program right now, but boy, do they have money, right? Yeah. And then you look at the group that we're in it for with Tyler Atkinson in Oregon, massive NIL spender. Texas, massive NIL spender. Georgia, to a lesser degree, but they'll throw some NIL money out there as well. I don't think they don't throw it out there nearly as much as a Texas and an Oregon, but
they get the national championship discount.
They get the winning discount, right? Yeah. And the hometown discount because he's from Georgia, right? So I think that's Clemson's biggest hill to climb is probably Georgia in that recruitment. And I do think they got a shot. And there's something to be said about mentioned in that top 4 with those big NIL spenders, because let's be real. Clemson's not offering the same amount of money as those other schools, but there's something that Clemson is offering that's at least appealing enough to him to put us in the top 4, right? Do we ultimately end up with Tyler Atkinson in the class? I really don't know at this point. But the thing that holds true is we have a shot. And if anybody that I want trying to convince somebody to come to Clemson, Ben Boulware's the guy, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's the guy you want trying to convince a young linebacker to come to Clemson. So, again, do we have a great shot? Who knows? But we do got a shot, and we'll see how it works out. Probably late July for the announcement. I agree with you on that. So still a couple weeks away before we figure out anything real. But again, we're in the mix, and you got a guy in Ben Boulware that is not going to sleep until he secures Tyler Atkinson as a Clemson Tiger. So I feel good about who's in charge of his recruitment, and we'll see where it goes.
Absolutely. And I mean, to your point, I mean, and you mentioned the NIL stuff. I mean, it hasn't all been for naught. I mean, Bryce Perry Wright didn't go your way, but you did beat Texas for Dre Quinn. Like, did we forget that just happened a few weeks ago? Like, there's, I mean, Clemson has certainly upped their game from that standpoint, and they're able, they're capable of winning these recruitments now. When you really had to have a special set of circumstances in a lot of cases to just flat out beat out a big time NIL spender like the Texas schools or Oregon or whatnot. So again, this is not us pumping up and saying, "Oh, Clemson's going to get Tyler Atkinson," but they have a shot, and he's played like I said, he's played things close to the vest. Him and his representation, they have a very deliberate and pointed way of going about the recruiting process. And I think there's some parts of that I think that actually plays into Clemson's favor, and it's not just who gives me the best offer. There's definitely there's a process that the Tyler Atkinson's camp is going through that feels a little bit more honest, I want to say, and upfront. So I do appreciate
that. It certainly seems that it's about more than just what my NIL check is going to be.
It reminds me of not to the same degree, but it kind of reminds me of Arch Manning's recruitment.
Yeah, very buttoned up, very like they have a very systematic approach, it seems, to how they go about things. And he was asked about his Clemson visit and their pitch and what they did, and he was impressed with Clemson's holistic pitch, to him, and that there was NIL in there, obviously, but it wasn't just about that. It was about their plan to graduate him in 3 years and all the other stuff that comes, a very detailed plan of this is how we would get you to the league, basically. And I think that resonates with a lot of these guys, and that's why Clemson is in on a lot of these bigger commitments, even the ones that we eventually lose out on. Those plans that they put together that are, yes, about NIL, but also about, hey, this is how we can graduate you in 3 years. This is what we can do with you in our strength and conditioning program. This is our plan. This is our defensive coordinator, our offensive coordinator's plan, and how you fit in this system. And, this is how we get you to the league, and so on and so forth. So I think that kind of stuff is what keeps Clemson competitive in these bigger time recruiting battles.
Oh yeah, 100%.